dead.
The concept of identity is a curious thing.
How would you describe yourself?
There's nothing. There's no self.
Due to its multifaceted and ever-changing nature, it can be hard to comprehend who we actually are.
When underneath that is something else. And so we all have the feeling we meet somebody, we have our first impression, and little by little, we see something else.
Beyond the surface lies our personality, values, relationships and experiences, all of which are tied together by our memory. But memories are inherently fallible. They're a mixture of truth and lie.
You know, how you remember things is not necessarily the way it actually happened, but it's the way you remember it. And it's maybe even more valid than the actual thing in some ways.
If we were shown our memories as they actually happened, how would our minds react to this? Would we accept them? Would we deny them? Dependent on our actions, it could be enough to fracture us.
So then
I waited until 1995 when Barry and I started writing Lost Highway.
3 years after Fire Walk With Me's disastrous reception, David would collaborate with author Barry Gifford to write the script for Lost Highway. Lynch was very familiar with Barry and his world, having previously adapted his novel, Wild at Heart, which in a controversial decision ended up winning the Palme d'Or at the 1990 Cannes Film Festival.
What was the idea of Lost Highway?
Well, actually, part of it was the two words Lost Highway, which Barry Gifford had written in his book Night People. And for some reason, those words made me dream.
David would combine the title with an idea that he had had on the last day of shooting Fire Walk With Me to form part of the inspiration for Lost Highway.
And the fragments...
What was the fragment, I mean, other than the title Lost Highway?
A couple receiving videotapes.
At the doorway.
They went more each tape, and a fear arose.
Yeah. It's the invasion of their...
Right, what does it mean?
Space.
Right.
While the title and videotape idea were important, David would later admit that the single biggest inspiration for Lost Highway was the O.J. Simpson trial that took place during 1995.
Looking back, I see it as starting with the O.J. Simpson trial that I was kind of obsessed with. And it struck me how someone could do murders and then go on living with themselves.
The inspiration of O.J.'s trial certainly helps in contextualising the main events of the film. Lost Highway's opening credits are accompanied by the aptly titled track, I'm Deranged by David Bowie, which provides an insight into Fred, who is slowly losing his sanity.
He's the kind of a regular guy, and he's smart, and he could be someone in trouble. And he could be someone sitting on a lot of trouble.
Fred loves his wife Renee, but he is also fearful of losing her. He is deeply insecure, which leads him to act in an increasingly possessive, jealous and aggressive manner.
both Fred and Renee have got locked in each other's kind of this grip on each other, which they are incredibly vulnerable and raw to each other. And it's a place that's very bad to be if you're in a relationship.
Fred struggles to differentiate between fact and fiction. He tells Renee about a dream he had last night. Which later plays out from the perspective of Renee.
Fred, where are you?
Fred also hates video cameras because they contradict his version of events.
I like to remember things my own way.
Fred's state of mind is reinforced by this section of the film's extensive use of fades in and out. The film's fractured and non-linear plot, as well as the production design.
Production design is its mood, it's things that have to be correct dictated by the script.
Out of all of Lost Highway's various locations, the house that Fred and Renee share is the most significant. The Madison home functions like a labyrinth with dark corridors leading to unknown places, making it incredibly difficult to ascertain the structure's exact layout. The living room and bedroom are sparsely and specifically decorated, with David himself making some of the furniture we see.
I wish I could build everything, but it would take forever, like Eraserhead took.
And finally you have the house's colour scheme, consisting of beige walls, grey floors, red drapes, and black bedsheets, all captured under constant shadow. There are ominous and mysterious forces at work here, a great darkness that hangs over both the home and Fred and Renee's marriage.
Mysteries, we love mysteries. Life is filled with them. And some of them are very abstract.
Undoubtedly, one of Lost Highway's biggest mysteries has to be Renee Madison. We know that she likes to laugh and she reads, but this is hardly enough to form any sort of picture of who she is. With Fred unable to satisfy Renee, he suspects that she is having an affair with Andy. Fred is completely unreliable as a narrator, but how exactly does Renee know Andy?
He told me about a job.
What job?
Her vague answers only make Fred more doubtful, more insecure, and more distrustful. The many mysteries that surround her are never answered, with Fred being placed on death row and sentenced to the electric chair. Fred is unable to comprehend or accept what he has done, so he assumes a new identity and enters a fugue state.
And we started, working on this, and in working on it, found out there is a medical name for this thing, psychogenic fugue, where the mind tricks itself, and you can either take on another identity or you do what you have to do to hide those things from yourself.
To try to explain the fugue state in literal terms is completely pointless.
And fugues at least make me feel insane. And so I like to experiment with, the form of a fugue.
However, the fugue does follow a general structure that is worth noting. Pete is very much the antithesis of Fred. He is a great mechanic who is very popular and well respected.
A lot of people are going to be real happy that you're back.
He is young, virile, and completely in control of his relationship with his girlfriend, Sheila.
Still care about me?
But the fantastical world of Pete begins to fall apart as traces of Fred's world begin to seep in. Firstly, he hears Fred's insane saxophone solo on the radio, and then most importantly he is introduced to Alice, or as Fred knows her, Renee.
I play in this movie two different interpretations of the same woman. I know it's strange.
Soon after meeting Alice and her initiating their romance, Pete begins to lose control. He becomes increasingly insecure, possessive, and jealous, just like Fred, and allows Alice to take over.
Why didn't you just leave?
For the sake of her love, he ends up taking out Andy before being permanently denied by Alice.
You'll never have me.
Which causes the fugue to end and the re-emergence of Fred. This outlines the general structure of the fugue, and even though not everything in it can be understood, it in no way detracts from the film.
Some things, strangely, are not so understandable. And but when things in films are not so understandable, people become worried. And yet they are, in some way, understandable.
One of the most important things to consider when looking at any of David's works is that at his core he is a painter, and he loves to paint in abstract and symbolic ways.
Many of the things that you subconsciously use in painting, you use in film. But I don't think about it so much as feel it.
This approach makes David's films so much fun to analyse, with the range of potential interpretations being nearly infinite. I particularly like the shot of the burning cabin in reverse, which is first shown as Fred sits and stares at his cell door. At this point, Fred's mind is completely destroyed, and in order for it to protect itself, the mind has to enter a fugue state. This is why the shot is shown in reverse, as it's representing the reversal of his mind's destruction. I also love the shot where the room spins into an image of Alice, which tells us that Pete is completely consumed by Alice at this point. Both of these are really beautiful examples of visual storytelling. In terms of characters that are abstractions in Lost Highway, chief among them would have to be the mystery man played by Robert Blake.
It's called Lost Highway.
Uh-huh, that's David Lynch, Lost, yeah.
And I play the devil, I think.
I think Robert's interpretation of the mystery man being the devil is a good starting point. The mystery man first appears atop Renee's face before he fully introduces himself to Fred at Andy's party.
We've met before, haven't we?
Clad in all black, the mystery man represents something that is familiar, and he is able to exist in multiple places at the same time.
You invited me. It is not my custom to go where I'm not wanted.
He is also a friend to Mr. Eddie, or as he's also known, Dick Laurent. Mr. Eddie is a person you don't want to mess with. He is involved in the production of adult films, is known to the police, and possesses a rather perverse moral code.
Fucking tailgate! Hammer!
Tell him you won't tailgate.
Hammer!
Despite Mr. Eddie's erratic behaviour, he initially expresses great admiration toward Pete. The issues between them only occur when Pete is introduced to Alice. So what connects Fred, Pete and Mr. Eddie? The answer is Renee, whom they all love and whom they're all insecure about losing. If we pay close attention, the mystery man appears when these men are all at the height of their insecurities and are in fear of losing Renee. He is there when Fred is unable to sexually satisfy Renee. He is there at the party when Renee is being overly friendly with Andy. He is there at the cabin door as Fred sits in his cell after her death. He is there when Mr. Eddie suspects Pete and Alice's relationship, and he is also there after Alice rejects Pete.
Her name is Renee. If she told you her name is Alice, she's lying.
The mystery man preys on the insecurities and fear of Fred, Pete and Mr. Eddie, pushing them all to commit unspeakable acts. He is the embodiment of evil, and the reason for his actions is anyone's guess.
There are many things, I think, that are out there that we don't know about, but sometimes, you get certain feelings.
Lost Highway concludes with Fred speaking into the intercom of his house, which turns the film into a Mobius strip, with everything coming full circle.
Dick Laurent is dead.
The police then arrive and chase Fred into the desert. I look at this as another piece of symbolism, with the police in fact escorting Fred to the electric chair, where he is consequently executed. What a journey Lost Highway is. The film remains one of Lynch's darkest and most incomprehensible works, with even David himself struggling to categorise it entirely.
Definitely is a kind of a film noir thing, but still it has a different elements going from a straight-ahead film noir. But it has that film noir thing for sure.
But even though the events of the film are largely incomprehensible, David's philosophy still shines through. David once said to the Los Angeles Times, and I quote, "Absurdity is what I like most in life."
I like absurd things.
And the world of Lost Highway is filled with events and characters acting in absurd ways. Why do certain things happen? Why do Fred, Pete and Mr. Eddie act the way they do? Why do all of them fall for Renee?
The most important thing is what you fall in love with. And the reason you fall in love is an abstraction. Nobody knows why they fall in love with this woman and not this one.
Yeah, or why they fall out of love.
Or why they fall out. Well, they know that a lot of times.
Yes, they do.
The answer is there is no answer. The universe is irrational and meaningless. One of the things that makes Lost Highway special is that it illustrates this concept not just with its characters and plot, but also with its structure. Even some of the film's thematic explorations, such as that of identity, benefit from David's surrealist and abstract style.
And your name? What the fuck is your name?
Overall then, I believe Lost Highway deserves recognition as one of Lynch's greatest and most unique works. An enigma that will permanently endure and terrify, because who knows what awaits on the Lost Highway, or where it will lead.
I get the psychogenic fugue almost every afternoon.
I wonder where you were going. Mulholland Drive.
Over 20 years since its initial release, and the mystery of Mulholland Drive still endures.
Why will elaborate on that?
No, I won't.
David Lynch has always declined to comment on the exact meaning of his films, and due to their surrealist and abstract nature, it can be somewhat difficult to figure them out. However, I think this is a great thing as it allows the audience to act as detectives and form their own thoughts and opinions. So what exactly happened in Mulholland Drive, and what does it all mean?
It makes me dream, and so I hated to say goodbye to that, but it was built primarily for a pilot, and a pilot has openings, but very few closings. So that was the trick.
Mulholland Drive originally being planned as a TV pilot goes a long way in explaining the film's structure. As a rough guideline, the entire section up until the opening of the blue box served as the TV pilot, while everything after that was added to make it into a feature film.
Get out of the car.
There are certain plot lines within the pilot portion of the film that are never elaborated on, such as why Rita is being hunted, but these sequences within the film do not detract from the whole, and can still be interpreted and understood.
In LA, Mulholland Drive is a famous road, and there's much mood. There's so many stories about that road, and it's a very kind of dreamy thing to think about.
The film up until the blue box is opened is a dream. This is clearly indicated right at the start of the film as the camera slowly moves towards a pillow. The red bedding and green sheet initially shown are also seen when Diane wakes up to reality later in the film. So this outlines the two-part structure of Mulholland Drive, but there is one key scene that occurs early on that we need to look at. Lynch cleverly even shows a set of keys on the table before heading into it.
I had a dream about this place.
Oh boy.
See what I mean?
The diner scene is a microcosm of the entire film and serves as an explanation of the entire plot. Dan explains that he has had two identical dreams of being at this Winkies. On both of these occasions it was half night, but it looks exactly like this. He is scared, but he realises there's a man in the back of this place. He's the one who's doing it, and he can see him through the wall. There is some very important context surrounding this scene. Firstly, the scene is bookended by Rita as she sleeps. This implies that this dream at Winkies is Rita's dream, and it is also fair to assume that Dan represents Rita in it. Also of note about this scene is that Betty is yet to be introduced within the dream, and we have only seen the image of her engulfed in light within the opening few minutes. So how is Rita able to dream within a dream, and who exactly is the person behind Winkies controlling everything?
Does duality play a lot in your work?
Well, yeah, duality, yeah. Yeah.
To state the obvious, duality is an essential part of David Lynch's films. This can be between reality and fiction, blonde and brunette, good and evil, etc. Specifically looking at David Lynch's LA trilogy, there is a clear emphasis on duality in regards to identity. Whether it's Renee and Alice in Lost Highway, or Nikki and Susan in Inland Empire, singular characters occupy multiple identities and names. Mulholland Drive explores exactly the same theme with Diane and Betty, as well as Rita and Camilla, for example. Within the unconscious mind of Diane are all of her thoughts, memories and feelings that are traumatic. I mentioned that it is implied that Rita dreamed within the mind of Diane, and throughout Mulholland Drive she is the only person within the dream world that we see fall asleep twice, or fall asleep at all for that matter, excluding Betty briefly at the end of the dream. Rita and Betty are two sides of the same person, two sides of Diane. From the film's very first line of dialogue,
"What are you doing?
What are you doing? We don't stop here.
We don't stop here."
to her being in possession of the money in the blue key, the same way Diane was at Winky's. Also at Winky's she sees the waitress's name tag of Diane, where Diane in the real world sees the name tag of Betty. I think the most critical scene, however, is when Betty and Rita make a joint phone call to Diane Selwyn within the dream.
Strange to be calling yourself. Maybe it's not me.
Let us further analyse the character of Rita. After the car accident, Rita walks down the hill to LA like a broken doll. She is an amnesiac and takes refuge at Aunt Ruth's where she meets Betty. As she has forgotten who she is, she adopts the name Rita from a poster for the 1946 film Gilda. Although Rita takes the name of a femme fatale type character, she never poses any risk to Betty. In fact, it is Betty who poses a danger to Rita, with her continually pushing Rita to try to find out who she is and placing her in distressing situations. While on the surface Betty seems like an idealistic version of Diane, I believe she is more complex than that. The very first scene of the film shows the jitterbug contest that Diane refers to at the dinner party.
I won this jitterbug contest. That sort of led to acting.
This is an interesting scene for a few different reasons. On your first watch of Mulholland Drive it won't make any sense, but more importantly it shows Betty alongside Irene and her companion, whom she arrived in LA with in the dream world. We do not see her dancing, and we do not see her partner. With the appearance of Betty engulfed in light, I don't believe this jitterbug contest ever took place. It is a complete fabrication, and it is the persona of Betty and not Diane that enters the dream world. The key scene that made this apparent to me is the audition scene. The director of this project is Bob Brooker, who in reality directed the Sylvia North story where Diane met Camilla. Within the dream world, Bob has been turned into an individual who seems to mumble complete nonsense, and his peers hold little respect for him. But if we take what Bob says to Betty and repurpose it for the jitterbug scene, I believe it makes perfect sense. No, it's not a contest. The two of them with themselves.
So, don't play it for real until it gets real.
If we take this audition as a memory, it shows that Diane was in a relationship with her dad's best friend when she was underage, and that if it was discovered he would go to jail. It is incredibly traumatic, and within this dream world it is the closest we come to reality.
And in working on it, found out there is a medical name for this thing, psychogenic fugue, where the mind tricks itself and you can either take on another identity or you do what you have to do to hide those things from yourself.
For anyone who is familiar with Lynch as an individual, it is incredibly clear that he is obsessed with the human mind, and he explores it in many different ways within his work. If Lost Highway is, as David said, an exploration of the mental condition known as psychogenic fugue, I believe Mulholland Drive to be an exploration of dissociative identity disorder, or as it's sometimes called, split personality, with both Rita and Betty serving as two distinct individual personalities within Diane. Going back to the opening scene on Mulholland Drive, there are two cars joyriding side by side, a visual metaphor for the two personalities. One of the cars crashes into the limo, while the other car keeps on driving. This marks the point that the personalities switched within Diane from that of Rita to that of Betty. While you could look at the car accident causing Rita's amnesia, I believe it is instead due to the fact that Betty is now in control and therefore Rita is unaware of what is taking place. She is afraid of the light, whereas Betty relishes in it. Mulholland Drive marks such a huge turning point in the life of Diane and the relationship she has with Camilla, so it makes a lot of sense that this would be the point where the personality of Betty emerges. Dissociative identity disorder emerges as a result of some form of overwhelming event or trauma. An alternate personality is created as a defense mechanism to prevent you from having to deal directly with the trauma. If we refer back to the audition once again, it was this traumatic event within Diane's life that initially created the persona of Betty, to shield her from the abuse of her childhood. When Betty is reading the scene with Rita, she severely downplays the severity of it, once again as a way of shielding her from this memory.
Such a lame scene. But you are really good.
Then there is this strong reaction from Rita.
Dream place. Well, you can imagine how I feel.
And this line of dialogue.
Come on, it'll be just like in the movies. We'll pretend to be someone else.
And then there is this visual technique, which is a direct reference to 1966's Persona, a film that served as a huge thematic inspiration for Mulholland Drive. Betty ultimately re-emerges as a reaction to Adam and Camilla's engagement, a significant emotional trauma that occurs in her life. It is no coincidence that when Diane is hiring the hitman, this is where we see the name tag for Betty. The dissolve to the back of Winky's shows who exactly is in control at this point, and proves that Betty is and has become a monster. Hollywood and its workings are portrayed in a very sinister way within Mulholland Drive, which given Lynch's experience with the studio system comes as no real surprise. Following his initial success with The Elephant Man, Lynch signed on to direct Dune, a film that he didn't have final cut or control over and regrets making more than any other.
On Dune, I started selling out even in the script phase, knowing I didn't have final cut, and I sold out. So it was a slow dying the death and a terrible, terrible experience.
On Twin Peaks, ABC executives insisted that Lynch and fellow Twin Peaks creator Mark Frost reveal Laura Palmer's killer's identity prematurely. Lynch reluctantly agreed, but has since called the decision one of his biggest professional regrets. Then there is the situation with Mulholland Drive, where Lynch once again ran into problems within the studio system.
And the executive in charge watched this pilot at 6 o'clock in the morning, standing up on the phone, drinking coffee with a thing on a TV across the room, and he didn't like it. So,
on the phone?
Making phone calls, you know, like an executives they do. So,
Lynch's own frustrations working within the studio system certainly echo in the character of Adam. While Adam is a brilliant director,
Who's a head above the rest.
He is put in a completely powerless position within the Hollywood studio system. Adam first appears in Mulholland Drive during his meeting with the Castigliani brothers, who make it clear to Adam the girl that he will cast for the Sylvia North story.
No way! That girl is in my movie! Help me!
While completely satirical in nature, it's quite easy for me to imagine Lynch having similar encounters with this type of person over the course of his career. As an artist, Adam does not wish to compromise the integrity of his film, so he declines their recommendation of whom he should cast. Of important note here is that the name of the girl is Camilla Rhodes, which is of course the name of Laura Harring's character in the real world. Adam would pay dearly for declining the recommendation, and in retaliation his film is shut down, his finances are stopped, and to top it all off his wife is having an affair.
Now you've done it.
Ironically, Adam's wife blames him for discovering the affair, as he shouldn't have been at the house at that time. He is a director with no control, neither over his films or his life. Adam's arc concludes when he concedes and picks the girl named Camilla. However, the girl he was really interested in was Betty, but due to the conspiracy and Betty leaving prematurely, they never got the opportunity to meet one another. Overall, it is easy to see that within Betty's dream world, her desire is to see Adam face significant difficulties, given that she blames Adam for taking Camilla from her, even though in reality Diane's and Camilla's relationship was always one-sided. Going back to the dinner party in the real world, Adam makes a toast with Camilla.
Here's to love.
Both individuals are present within the frame when this line of dialogue is spoken. However, when Diane gives the toast to Camilla, she delivers the line while being the only individual in the shot, before we see Camilla's reaction.
Here's to love.
Subtle creative decisions like these really add to the depth of the film.
Beautiful evening.
Yeah.
Among the individuals Adam encounters, the cowboy is by far the most enigmatic. When you think about cowboys, what is the first thing you think of? For me, it's moments like these. Gunslingers are a staple character type within old Hollywood westerns, and the cowboy within Mulholland Drive exudes a similar aura. He is a hired gun of the Castigliani brothers, who makes it clear to Adam that if he wants to live the good life, then he will choose the girl. What's especially interesting about the cowboy is that he seems to transcend the limitations of the dream. When he first meets Adam, the light flickers strongly and he gives Adam the message. You'll see me one more time if you do good.
You'll see me 2 more times if you do bad.
This message is not for Adam, but instead for Diane. From this point in the film we do see the cowboy 2 more times, once when he wakes Diane up, and the second time at the dinner party where he walks by the girl who kissed Camilla. Overall, I believe the cowboy represents the enforcement of evil within Hollywood, the dream, and the real world.
Man's attitude goes some ways, the way his life will be.
Film is a language. It speaks to people, but not always with words and solely with the intellect. So it takes not an effort, but a certain attitude to see certain films that have these abstractions or things that are not so normal, but they're very easily understood if you think and feel and arrive at your own conclusion.
The studio system acts as the hierarchy for the dream world. Mr. Roke is searching for Rita for a reason that is never explained. However, what we do see is when the Dream Mafia is calling around, they call Betty with her distinctive red lampshade, black phone, and cigarette butts. We did not know this initially, but this is the very first time reality creeps into the dream world. Within the course of the film, we never see Betty smoke, and this is the closest gesture we see to smoking. The film's silliest moment comes when the hitman makes a real mess of his job. He manages to retrieve Ed's black book, but only after killing 2 extra individuals and setting off the fire alarm. Perhaps this moment is Betty's hope that the hitman failed the hit on Camilla in some way, that she may still be alive. Or perhaps this is just a plotline that would have made more sense and been expanded on if Mulholland Drive got the green light as a TV show. Another important scene is when Louise Bonner knocks at the door.
My name's Betty.
No, it's not. That's not what she said.
This is the only scene Louise appears in, but she has a destabilising effect on Betty and her dream world. Who Louise is never explained beyond her being a tenant who knows Aunt Ruth. I'll just throw out the theory that I believe Louise may be the real-life landlord of Diane. She tries to evict someone out of her home within the dream, and Louise's presence may explain why Diane changed apartments in the real world.
That one is in my room and she won't leave. I want you to get her out. I want you to get her out now.
At the Sierra Bonita apartments, both Rita and Betty evade the eyes of the detectives. The woman who Diane swapped apartments with eyes Rita intently, which is a stark contrast from other interactions within the dream world, where Betty was always the centre of attention. While Rita is happy to leave, Betty is persistent in accessing number 17 where Diane is residing.
What are you doing? Come on, help me in.
Upon their entry, they are overwhelmed by a smell, and Betty leads Rita to Diane's corpse. Rita reacts much more violently than Betty does, whose reaction is somewhat muted. To me, the corpse represents Rita's greatest fear of being abandoned, left to decay and being entirely forgotten by the world. Upon seeing this, she cuts her hair and seeks to change her appearance. Her image mirrors Betty, and this marks the point where two distinct personalities begin merging to become one. Betty's actions towards her altar were only ever out of love, and to protect her true self from the trauma she suffered. Knowing this makes the events of the real world even more tragic.
Film is so much like music. So much of it is feeling. And if the mind gets engaged, there's a thing called intuition, where you feel and think to arrive at an inner knowing.
After waking up, Betty and Rita head for a taxi. The lamppost has a poster attached to it that reads "Hollywood is hell," and a blurred effect is used for the first time. We see a similar effect used both as Betty with herself and when she is at the dinner party. These blurs definitely indicate a passage of time, but I believe they also represent the increasingly blurred lines between the dream world and reality.
No hay banda. There is no band.
The magician's monologue can be interpreted in several different ways. Firstly, it confirms that yes, this world we have inhabited for the entire film up until this point is in fact an illusion. It is also a clever play on the incredible nature of cinema and its ability to manipulate sound and imagery. I would also like to raise another idea. The individual who delivers the film's final silencio sits above the magician when he summons lightning. This sound affects Betty in a profound way, causing her to shake in fear. This same visual motif can also be found in the real world, as Betty stares blankly at the blue key. Betty is no longer in control and she has lost her power over the dream and over Diane. The reason she shakes is because she has been directly confronted and outed for who she is. Rebecca Del Rio comes on stage and performs the Spanish version of the song Crying. I will spare you the pain of reading all of the lyrics in English, but they're all quite self-explanatory within the context of the story. In an exquisite use of sound, Rebecca collapses but the song continues to play. How do you react to this? Such a beautiful song mixed with such a horrific sight. Both Rita and Betty return to Aunt Ruth's where Betty disappears and leaves Rita all alone. This is one of the most critical scenes of the film, the collapse of the dream world. When Rita opens the box, she finally learns the truth. She finally accepts the trauma that Betty has been shielding from her, and she learns about what Betty has done in her absence. When the cowboy wakes Diane up, Rita is shown first, and then it switches to Betty's corpse, reiterating that it is in fact the personality of Rita that is returning to the real world. Irene and presumably her husband appear 3 times in Mulholland Drive. Firstly alongside Betty coveted in light, secondly when Betty arrives in LA, and thirdly at Diane's apartment. Irene and her husband are very encouraging and supportive of Betty.
Remember, I'll be watching for you on the big screen.
Okay, Irene. Won't that be the day?
I believe encouragement is what they symbolise, and specifically towards Betty. What makes them uncanny is that they are so one-dimensional as characters. Betty sees them only as a sign of encouragement, so even when they leave her side, they continue smiling. There is also a duality to encouragement, as it is entirely dependent on what or who is being encouraged. The acts that Betty committed is something that Diane cannot live with, and they appear from the blue box as remnants of Betty's monstrosity. Their continued and relentless encouragement within her apartment overwhelms Diane to the point of self-destruction.
How interested are you in logic in any traditional sense, because some of the films do?
No, all of them have a logic. I'm very interested in logic.
Okay, so to recap everything chronologically. Diane moves to LA after the death of her aunt in an attempt to become an actress. She auditions for the Sylvia North story, which is a role she really wanted, but ultimately loses out to Camilla. The Sylvia North story is where the pair originally met, and from there they became friends and from Diane's perspective engaged in a relationship. Camilla would help Diane get roles, but the nature of their relationship changed upon Camilla meeting Adam, the man she would eventually plan to marry. Due to the trauma of the engagement, Betty, who is a distinct personality within Diane, re-emerges. Diane does not have control over her alter Betty. Her personality is completely different and she acts to try and protect Diane from this trauma. She orders the hit and then receives the blue key as proof that the job has been completed. Upon receiving the key, she goes to sleep as Betty and we enter the dream world. Events unfold and Betty slowly loses control over Diane and the dream. This was not supposed to happen, and Rita, who is Diane's true self, opens the blue box where she learns the full truth and what Betty has done in her absence. She is consumed by grief and loss, as this is not what she wanted. She loved Camilla and she cannot come to terms with what she has done. This is also one of the reasons she never reciprocated Betty's love within the dream. She stares blankly at the blue key before there is a knock at the door, from whom we don't know but are most likely the detectives. Irene and her husband enter Diane's apartment. Their presence overwhelms Diane and she tragically meets her end. Both Rita and Betty, one potential star lost amongst the lights of Hollywood. When put linearly, the plot is actually quite simple, but how exactly do the narrative threads connect and what does it all mean? It's something I've thought about for a long time, until suddenly it hit me. Control is an illusion.
It's all recorded.
We have far less control over events and situations than we care to believe.
It is all.
I think the tragedy of Mulholland Drive is Diane's lack of control, which is not her fault. She could not control her career in Hollywood or her relationship with Camilla. Opposed to leaving as she did when she was a child, Betty instead decided to take action. She tried to assert more control, but the more she tried to control her situation, the more everything eluded her, leading to Camilla's and Diane's eventual destruction.
That's the big lesson. Don't make a film if it can't be the film you want to make. It's a joke, and a sick joke, and it'll kill you.
Who is she?
Has there ever been a cooler Oscar campaign for an actor in a film than this?
And David sat on Hollywood Boulevard in a director's chair with a cow on a leash and a poster of Inland Empire that said, "For your consideration," and had a cigarette in hand and just hung out.
Yeah.
And two guys were driving up and they're like,
What the is David Lynch doing? He's just sitting on the corner of La Brea in Hollywood with a cow.
If you want to see the greatest performance of 2006, check out Laura Dern's performance in Inland Empire.
Even before its release, there was absolutely nothing conventional about Inland Empire. The film marked a series of firsts for director David Lynch, with the film being his first shot without a finished screenplay.
On this particular film, I would get an idea, write it down, and then go shoot it. And so I didn't know if a whole thing would emerge. I don't know how one relates to the other. But it didn't really bother me. I just kept doing that until one time it kind of started
unfolding how they all related.
Inland Empire also marked the first time David would shoot a feature film entirely in digital.
I love digital. And this particular film I shot with not a high-def camera, but a fairly inexpensive Sony PD-150. But the experience was so liberating, and so beautiful. Automatic focus, 40-minute takes, lightweight. It's just built for scenes and going deep in a scene.
The Sony PD-150 allowed David to shoot with a newfound freedom. The film features extensive handheld close-ups painted in a blurred, pixelated and sometimes unclear fashion. This aesthetic really adds to the film, elevating its overall mystery and ambiguity.
Film is so beautiful, but it used to be in the 30s less quality, and this DV that I was shooting reminded me of that. So it's just some information is lost, and it made me feel like there was more room to dream.
With all of this considered, however, it is unsurprising that Inland Empire is David Lynch's most inaccessible work.
While I was watching Inland Empire, at the beginning I felt that I was struggling to understand the movie.
Yeah, a common occurrence.
One of the things about David's films in the LA trilogy is that he uses the medium of film in a very temporal way. The non-linear narratives of Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive cannot be comprehended in a single viewing, and in comparison to these films, Inland Empire's narrative is even more non-linear. However, just because Inland's narrative is more challenging and Lynchian in nature, this doesn't mean that the film is nonsensical or that it's beyond comprehension.
You've described it as a film about a woman in trouble.
A woman in trouble, yeah.
The tagline of Inland Empire reads "A woman in trouble," but who exactly is the woman in trouble?
The longest running radio play in history.
Inland Empire opens in black and white at an old hotel in the Baltic region. The longest running radio play in history, Axon N, connects us to the character called the Lost Girl, who is trapped in this hotel room and is Inland Empire's woman in trouble. When we are first introduced to the Lost Girl, she is crying whilst watching TV, but as her life is depicted throughout the film, we see she is in fact from a period era of Poland.
I love the mood of Łódź, Poland in the winter. It was very interesting architecture and these black trees and low-hanging gray clouds and these factories, and I started to dream, and some scenes came, and those scenes and other ideas came into Inland Empire.
The Lost Girl was married to the Phantom, or as he's also known, Crimp. After the death of her son, she begins an affair with a lover whose wife is infertile. The Phantom is physically abusive and knows that the Lost Girl is cheating on him, which results in his departure. The affair the Lost Girl is having also breaks down due to her lover being killed, which forces the Lost Girl to work the streets. Blaming the wife for her lover's death and her predicament, the Lost Girl ends up disposing of her with a screwdriver. As punishment, she is locked in a purgatory-like place that appears as a hotel room, and there she is forced to relive her own traumas and the curse's continuation via a TV.
Tell the truth now.
Can I? You told me I could tell the truth. The truth is, I didn't know who I was playing, and I still don't know who I played. And I look forward to seeing the film tonight to learn more.
We can determine that this is the story of the Lost Girl based off of the story of Sue Blue. Hollywood actress Nikki Grace is cast as Sue Blue in the film titled On High and Blue Tomorrows, which is a remake of a film based on a Polish gypsy folktale that was never finished.
The title in German was Vier Sieben, 4-7, and it was said to be cursed.
As filming progresses, the actress Nikki Grace completely loses herself in the role of Sue Blue, and roles that were once clearly defined become completely blurred.
Damn! This sounds like dialogue from our script!
Absorbed in the story of On High and Blue Tomorrows, Nikki is able to communicate with the Lost Girl, who directs her to learn the truth behind this story. All of the events that took place in the Lost Girl's life are rehashed, only this time the outcome is different because Nikki was not alone in her quest to stop the Phantom and break the curse.
Could you explain the presence of the 3 rabbits, particularly the one in pink doing the ironing?
No, I can't explain that.
Animals are the subject of multiple discussions in Inland Empire.
I've always loved animals. Their nature, how they think.
The Rabbits sitcom that the Lost Girl watches was originally a series of 8 short films that David uploaded to his website back in 2002, a few years before the release of Inland Empire. The voice cast reunites Naomi Watts, Laura Harring and Scott Coffey, who previously appeared together in Mulholland Drive. By combining some of the footage from the sitcom with previously unseen footage, the rabbits found in Inland Empire are a force of good.
I have a secret.
Jack Rabbit is seemingly the only rabbit able to leave the sitcom home, and he observes a meeting where the Phantom is looking for an opening. The rabbits can also take the form of humans, as Jack does with Mr. K, or as the family of rabbits do when they send for Sue's husband, Smithy, at the seance with the Lost Girl.
It was said that I have a way with animals.
The Lost Girl warns Smithy about his boss the Phantom and is given a pistol, which he must return to his drawer so that Nikki is able to retrieve it later on.
Zaprowadzono konia do studni.
The rabbits live in room number 47 and are also cursed by the recurring story of On High and Blue Tomorrows. The reason they help Nikki fulfill her role is so that they can in turn be liberated from theirs.
The horse to the well.
They lead the horse to the well, but along the way, Sue appears to bleed out and pass on.
Like whenever we die, do you believe that then the consciousness doesn't continue, or do you believe it continues? Like
Continues, continuum. You are you, and you just keep being you.
The camera pans back to reveal that this scene was being filmed. Was it a scene or was it reality? It's impossible to tell either way, but regardless of whether the body died or not, this event changes Nikki's consciousness. She passes to another dimension and is now able to see the Lost Girl through her TV. During the remaining portion of the film, Nikki does not speak again, and is guided by Jack Rabbit to a door that reads Axe on N. Beyond the door lies the familiar architecture of Smithy's house, and it is here she obtains the pistol that allows her to defeat the Phantom and break the curse, freeing all who were trapped in it.
There's an expression, the world is as you are. So when things get a hair more abstract, you get a lot of different interpretations. And so if you see it that way, totally beautiful.
This is my interpretation of the events of Inland Empire. However, I believe there is also a deeper meaning here.
And Maharishi Mahesh Yogi teaches a technique called transcendental meditation. It's a simple, easy, effortless technique, yet supremely profound, that allows any human being to dive within, experiencing subtler levels of mind and intellect, and transcend and experience this ocean of pure consciousness.
David would begin transcendental meditation during the production of Eraserhead, and ever since it has been an essential part of his being and creative process.
I've been meditating now since that July 1st, 1973, twice a day, ever since, and I've never missed a meditation.
Transcendental meditation has several benefits, such as stress relief and relaxation.
Your stress and tension and sorrow or depression or anything is going to start dissolving. Negativity cannot live in this light of unity.
Transcendental meditation also promotes higher states of consciousness.
If there wasn't any consciousness, we wouldn't exist. And if we did exist, we wouldn't know it. It's the I amness of life. It is life itself.
Throughout numerous interviews, David has made reference to something called the unified field.
Modern science has discovered and verified the existence of the unified field at the base of all matter and mind. So, knowing that there's a unified field, we all are united at that deepest level.
David explains that the technique of transcendental meditation allows the individual to access this field.
Anything that is a thing has emerged from this field of unity. It's oneness. The scientists know this exists, but if they wanted to get there, you can't get there. It's unmanifest. You can't walk into this field. But any one of those scientists could practice a technique, transcendental meditation.
So how exactly does transcendental meditation connect to Inland Empire? The connection becomes evident when the first visitor meets Nikki, with their conversation being a microcosm of the events of the film.
Lost in the marketplace.
While reciting the old tale of the little girl who went out to play, the first visitor mentions the marketplace. But what is the marketplace? In an interview with Richard A. Barney, which is included in Criterion's release of Inland Empire, when discussing the film, David would say, and I quote, "There's a field of relativity. It has a surface and it has depths. There are, like they say, worlds within worlds within worlds. Just unbelievable stuff going on in the field of relativity. And that's all real interesting, but as Maharishi says, that's only the marketplace. You go through the marketplace and it's real interesting, but there are lots and lots of chances to get waylaid and even go backwards and get lost, get in trouble."
This is the way to the palace.
David would conclude his quote by saying, "Get to the palace means transcend, get to the deepest level, and Nikki Grace isn't getting there. Nikki Grace is somewhere else, and she does experience different kinds of things."
Transcend is the key word. It means to go beyond. You're going beyond field of relativity, duality, experiencing oneness.
The self learns about the self, or Nikki learns about Sue and the Lost Girl, expanding her consciousness and enabling her to reach the unified field. She has fulfilled her role, her potential, and so she reaches enlightenment.
The human has this potential, and they have names for this potential: enlightenment, liberation, salvation, fulfillment. Huge potential for the human being. And we don't need to suffer. You enliven this thing and you realize that bliss is our nature. We're like happy campers, flowing with ideas. Like I say, these little dogs, their tails are just wagging. It's not a goofball thing. It's a beautiful, full thing. Really, really, really great.
Everything that emerges is from the unified field, and the end credits show us David's very own cinematic version of it. Laura Harring from Mulholland Drive, the lumberjack with a log from Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet, and of course David's longtime collaborator and star of the show, the brilliant Laura Dern, are unified at the palace. As David said, even in the so-called dark things there is beauty, and what a beautiful ending it is, not just for Inland Empire but also for David's LA trilogy, and potentially even his entire filmography, given the recent news of David's emphysema diagnosis, and the fact that he is no longer able to direct films in person. It breaks my heart that someone who has given so much to the world would be in a position where he is homebound, and can only walk a short distance due to his condition. But despite all of his difficulties, David said in a statement that he is filled with happiness. What a beautiful soul. I love you, David, and no matter what the future holds, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everything.
Thank you very much. And I wish you all the very, very best.
To anyone who's made it this far into the video, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to you. The 3 essays found here were a complete labour of love, which over several months took me hundreds of hours of research, editing and catching ideas in order to construct. It has been an incredible honour to study David's films and the man himself over this past year, and along the way I have learnt so many things that inform my own creative approach, such as transcendental meditation, which I have now been practicing for some time. Things such as absurdity, duality, non-linear narratives, identity, and women in trouble connect David Lynch's LA trilogy, and yet each film remains distinct from one another. In an interview with Richard A. Barney, David said, "And the whole story really is the self knowing the self. Unbelievable story we're involved in. If there is anything that truly connects the cerebral LA trilogy, then it would be this. In Lost Highway, Fred's mind stops the self from learning about itself via way of a fugue state. In Mulholland Drive, as the self learns about the self, it destroys Diane. And in Inland Empire, when the self finally learns about the self, Nikki becomes enlightened and unified.
Know thyself. Get there. Know it by being it. Unfold it. And what you're doing is unfolding your full potential as a human being. Your full potential of the beautiful human being is called enlightenment. And people can unfold their enlightenment.
Ultimately, however, there may not be any overarching philosophy. David makes his films not for himself or the audience, but for the idea itself, which I think is such a beautiful and unique creative approach. There will never be another David Lynch, and I really hope that my work here has done his films justice. After spending so much time in his world, I have the recurring question of whether or not David is the greatest director of all time. And honestly, after considering the question for a long period of time, he might just be.
What is reality for you?
I haven't got a clue what is reality. I'm sure I'll be surprised when I learn what it is.